Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our first session for Homecoming at Home. In this session, Homebase, maximizing your living situation for academic success. We are just going to take a couple minutes to let everyone join our session and we will get started. And as participants are joining, I just want to bring attention to our reminder that this session is being recorded. All right. Well, I will kick things off. Thank you for joining us today for this first Homecoming at Home session. One last reminder that this session is being recorded and will be available for viewing later on the Parent and Family Programs YouTube channel. Before we jump into tonight's session, I do want to bring your attention to the Q&A tool at the bottom of your screens. Throughout the session, you will be able to utilize this tool to ask any questions. We do have a time at the end of tonight's session for an open Q&A with our panel, but we also have staff members who will be answering your questions offline through text during the session as well. So please feel free at any time during the session if you do have a question to pose it utilizing the Q&A feature as part of the Zoom webinar tool. All right, well, my name is Dan Perez. I am the program coordinator for the Office of Parent and Family Programs, and I have the pleasure of introducing our panelists for this session, Homebase, maximizing your living situation for academic success. Our very first session of this year's Homecoming at Home for UC San Diego's Homecoming 2020. We have a great panel set up for you, and I don't want to, take up too much time, so I'm going to pass it off to our first panelist tonight, Renee Delacqua, who will be talking about Zoom Burnout.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Renee Delacqua, and I am a health educator in health promotion services here at UC San Diego. So I'm going to be talking about something that I think is really near and dear to our hearts, given our current environment of remote learning and working, and that is Zoom. So Zoom has been so beneficial in that it has allowed us to work and learn in a remote capacity during these really uncertain times. And it's also allowed us to connect with other people. And so while it does have a lot of positives, it also comes with some drawbacks, and that is Zoom burnout. So Zoom burnout, when we think of burnout in just the normal traditional sense, we think of things like feeling really exhausted, feeling fatigued, feeling like we have a loss of motivation as a result of a current situation that we're experiencing or our work environment. And so just like that burnout in that traditional sense, we also can experience Zoom burnout, or we can also experience something called Zoom burnout or Zoom fatigue. And the reason this happens is for there's multiple reasons why this happens. So I'm going to talk a little bit about why Zoom burnout can occur and why your students or even yourself may be experiencing this. So one thing is Zoom requires us to be constantly connected with other people via camera, and that is just not the norm for us. And because it's not the norm, that requires a lot of adjustments mentally, emotionally, even physically, that we're sitting down and looking at our computers, interacting with one another. And so that can be really exhausting and really draining. The other thing is that Zoom requires us to force a constant gaze. So unlike being in a classroom setting or being in a conference room where we're interacting with other people in a physical capacity, where we can kind of look across the room and relax our gaze, in a Zoom environment, we are forced to have that constant gaze. And so that can be really exhausting for our eyes and our minds. And it doesn't give us the opportunity to look away from our computers unless we intentionally do so. Other things kind of related to that, less opportunities to relax our gaze and refocus. We also might have a hyper awareness of not only our appearance of what we're looking like when we're on the camera, but also what our surroundings are like. What are other people seeing in our backgrounds? And so that can be a little bit anxiety inducing. That can cause a little bit more stress than we normally would experience in a physical environment. And then the last few things, because we're on Zoom, because we're on our computers, it offers so many opportunities to multitask. And even if we're not consciously aware, when we multitask, that's really utilizing a lot of brain power, a lot of brain energy, that's requiring a lot of focus and attention. And so that in and of itself can be very exhausting as well. And then lastly, as you all may have experienced, as many of your students will be experiencing, it's those back-to-back Zoom meetings. We're not getting in those breaks like we typically would if we're on campus in a physical environment where we get to walk from class to class, or we have more breaks in between. And so we're jumping from one call to the next. And again, that can be really exhausting. So Dan, next slide. So what are the signs of Zoom burnout? We talked about what it looks like in a traditional setting when we're, our traditional definition when we think of burnout. And so those are the same types of signs and symptoms that we may experience when we're talking about Zoom burnout itself. So you may start seeing that your students are experiencing things like exhaustion, loss of motivation, maybe even loss of engagement in the classes. Even if it's a class that they're really enthusiastic about, they might not be as motivated. They may feel really overwhelmed. They might have difficulty concentrating, and maybe they're having this this perpetual sense of dread of either working or learning via Zoom and having to jump onto that next Zoom call. Next slide, Dan. So now that we know what Zoom burnout is all about and what are some of those signs and symptoms to kind of look out for when we're talking about Zoom burnout, let's talk about some strategies for overcoming it and then also preventing it. So there are multiple strategies. These are just a few that we came up with. So one is, before even jumping on a call, taking a few moments to really ground yourself. Take some slow and steady breaths, maybe even set a positive intention prior to joining that meeting. So for example, say your student is about to join, hop onto their calculus Zoom, and they're not really looking forward to it. Encouraging them to take a few slow, deep, steady breaths, and then also set that positive intention. Something like, okay, when I join the Zoom call, I'm going to listen as intently as possible, and I'm really going to try to get as much out of this class as possible. The next is choose speaker view. So this goes back to kind of reducing some of that overstimulation that happens when we're on a Zoom call. So when we're on a Zoom call, we're seeing, we have the opportunity to look at a gallery view. So that opens up kind of Pandora's box when we're thinking of looking at all the different people on the camera, looking at what their backgrounds, what their facial expressions are. Choosing speaker view allows your mind to rest a little bit more easy, allowing your mind to focus on just one person speaking at a time. The next, resist the urge to multitask as much as possible. It can get so easy when we're on the computer to get pinged with an instant message or get distracted by responding to emails or doing other assignments. So really just trying to be in the present moment to really focus on that class that you are currently attending. Next, periodically relax your gaze. Because Zoom really forces that constant gaze, we have to be really intentional about relaxing our gaze. So for example, having your student, look across the room at the clock or a knickknack on a bookshelf, something to relax your gaze, to kind of take your eye focus away from the computer and just to look away, even if it's just for a few seconds, and then look back at the computer. And that can really help not only mentally, but also physiologically in terms of relaxing your eyes and just allowing you to kind of break that constant gaze. Next, obviously, Zoom has become a really popular platform for socializing. And so if there is a time where you're already kind of seeing those signs and symptoms of Zoom burnout, but you've already scheduled a phone call with friends or family in the evening, but you're like, I'm so burnt out already, asking your friend or family member, like, hey, could we communicate in a different way, whether that's having just a normal phone call or exchanging text or emails, something that kind of breaks up the monotony of being on a Zoom call. So trying to figure out, are there other ways that we can communicate where we don't have to be on Zoom constantly as required by work and our learning environment. The next is just practice consistent self-kindness through self-care. So one, it's really acknowledging the fact that we are in unusual times, and it's just so important to be really compassionate with yourself, validating your feelings, validating what you're going through, and then also making sure that we're taking time to take care of ourselves. So not just being on the grind of school and work 24/7, but making sure we're really fitting in times where we can relax, recharge, refocus, engage in activities that are really fun and engaging for you. And then kind of tying into that self-care is also being very intentional about scheduling breaks throughout your day. And so that's going to transition me into the other piece of the presentation. Dan, next slide. So are so amazing when it comes to productivity. It is far too easy to be on the go for hours at a time, even when we're working and learning in a remote capacity. So breaks, what science is really showing us is that when we take breaks, it optimizes our performance by one, increasing productivity, two, encouraging creativity, three, improving our cognitive functioning. Most importantly, when it comes to information and memory retention, and this is so important when students are trying to learn and retain that information and do well in class. So breaks are really great for that cognitive functioning piece. And then lastly, it's great for improving mental well-being. And this is so important, not only for academic success, but also for the personal success and growth of the student. We want to make sure that they are at their optimal level when it comes to their mental and emotional well-being. And taking breaks really capitalizes on that and really facilitates that. So when we're talking about breaks, everyone is so unique and so different. So it's really just trying to figure out how to make breaks work for you, how to make breaks work for your student. So an example for that is, say every 10 minutes or for every 60 minutes of work, you take that 10-minute break. Or there's something called the Pomodoro technique or method. Next slide. So this technique, it's basically researchers who have really tried to capitalize on how efficient we can be with breaks and what the capacity of our mind is and when we need to take breaks. And so this technique has really broken it down, and I'll go through each of these steps really quickly. So one, it's having that to-do list. So you have your to-do list, and now picking one task that you want to get done in a certain amount of time. So say you pick your first task on your to-do list. From there, you would set a timer for 25 minutes. You'd work on that task, trying not to be distracted, not multitasking, focusing on that task until that 25-minute timer rings. Once that timer goes off, you drop what you're doing, you take a short 5-minute break, and then you repeat this for 4 cycles total. And you take, after you've done these 25-minute chunks with those 5-minute breaks, then you would take a more extended break of 15 to 30 minutes. And so this is just one technique for your students or yourself who like to have a little bit more of a strategy when it comes to certain things. Even if it comes to breaks, this method can be really amazing. If not, keep it simple where it's every 60 minutes, take that 10-minute break. So now I'm going to pass it on to my colleague, Christine Glissman.
Another thing of Zoom fatigue, you forget you're on mute. Okay, hello, my name is Christine Glissman. I am also a health educator in health promotion services at UC San Diego. And I'm going to be talking a little bit more about sort of optimizing those breaks or sort of getting in micro movements or sort of implementing exercise, movement, physical activity, dancing, whatever you want at home. And this is for students, anyone that is near a screen or anything like that. So as you heard Renee mention, and I will also sort of drive that point home, is really getting away from staring with that constant gaze at the screen. Optometrists are starting to say that they're seeing our this generation really come up with a lot of like lens fatigue. There's a lot of different minute muscles in your eye, and they are seeing those being fatigued and the lens not being able to contract or relax as easily. So making note to really look away from the screen periodically is very important. It's also very important, so when you're taking these breaks, not to go from screen to another screen, right? You really want to make sure that you're looking at a faraway point. So we've got this 20-20-20 rule. So for every 20 minutes of usage, now there's a lot of breakdowns after every, 60 minutes of work, 10 minutes break, 25 minutes. So maybe when you have a break, kind of put them all together, right? So 20-20-20 is one way, but really anytime you think of having a break, look away for 20 seconds at a fixed point, kind of like Renee said, place in the wall, but make sure you stare at it for a little bit where your eyes, and that lens in there actually gets to relax a little bit. That's going to be very important to prevent that eye strain and then some of that Zoom fatigue that Renee was talking about. Some other things that we can do, which I will kind of demonstrate in the next few slides, is micro movements while you're working. So for everyone on the Zoom call right now, I want you to just roll your shoulders up and then drop them down and back. We so easily, I'm doing it too because I'm leaning forward, but you'll find yourself crunched forward in kind of like a little gremlin pose. So it's so important to really open up that chest, make sure those shoulders aren't creeping to those ears, and making sure we're dropping those down and back. Some seated stretches are also really nice, both for posture, working those postural muscles. And it's also a nice sort of break to get kind of the blood flowing again. Taking a walk is always going to be something that's going to be given, I think, as a recommendation. But if you're in the middle of a class or a work meeting or something like that, you probably can't just get up and leave. So maybe some subtle stretches might kind of help get that energy up again. So the third piece, really sort of exercising at home, kind of like how Renee said that to really include self-care in your day and to kind of schedule those things. It's kind of the same way for physical activity or movement. It's going to be the easiest sort of transition if you write it into your schedule. Now, if you normally don't say go to a gym or something like that, but going on a walk is kind of your jam before, during lunch or something like that, I encourage you to keep doing that. But if you're not moving as much, including a walk first is kind of the easiest way. We're kind of only able to be around our social bubble. So maybe making a little walking group with whomever is in your home, because that is now sort of your COVID bubble. So you're able to kind of walk with them and get the movement going a little bit as well. Also, it is helpful to create sort of a designated space for things. So school, work should not be in your bed, right? Kind of leave that just for sleep and for relaxing time. So really designating spaces in your house is extremely important as well. So designated space to maybe do some movement if you like to do yoga videos or videos online, or if you like to weightlift, if those are in the corner somewhere. Designating your spots for work, for play, for snacks, for whatever you want to do, but designating those spaces will help with motivation and also create a little bit of that separation from I'm in school mode to now to be able to relax. So I'm saying, okay, I'm going to get some movement in. That's going to be very important for that mental health piece, also that Zoom burnout piece as well. And thinking of sort of exercise or getting movement in, you don't have to be super creative. When I say sort of stick to the basics, you don't have to get fancy. That could be squats, that could be a walk, that could be marching, it could be anything, dancing around the room, anything like that. You don't have to have this very elaborate sort of plan, but just getting up, stretching, moving in any way, chasing an animal or something like that is a very nice way to kind of incorporate movement. So I'm going to show you some of those sort of seated stretches now. So Dan, could you go to the next slide, please? So this is the first one. I'm going to provide 4 and we're going to do these together. As you can see, the instructions are on the right-hand side. What we'll do them together, lift arms overhead, Again, making sure those shoulders are pushed down, not letting them creep up to your ears. Interlace those fingers, palms facing each other. You're going to push that fist to the sky to really feel a stretch on your lat or your back and your shoulders as well. And for a little bit more, you can bring up a little bit of a bend on either side as well. Really nice to just make sure we're elongating ourselves and not being in a crunch position on the computer. Next slide, please. So that was the overhead reach, something super simple. This is for the back of your shoulders, but again, you're going to lift up, making sure those shoulders are down, interlace your fingers, and you're going to push the palms forward and just kind of like statically push against the air, and you'll feel a stretch in the bottom of your neck and also in between your shoulder blades as well. So we'll do 2 more together. These are obviously super simple ways to kind of get activity up a little bit, bring a little bit of heat, wake you up a little bit, but also kind of loosen up from crunching in front of a computer. Okay, next one, Dan, next slide, please. All right, the over and under reach. I cannot interlace my fingers. I have very tight shoulders, I think like a lot of people. So you kind of just do your best, but you will sort of mimic that. So 1 over, 1 under. And I don't want you to creep those shoulders together or those hands together if you can't touch them. But really just placing there, you'll notice there's might be some tightness in your chest that'll open up. And then also on the tricep, that'll open up that as well. And then you can switch sides. If holding is too difficult, I encourage just a little bit of swapping like this. Kind of a funny move, but gets the blood flowing and really opens up the chest and the shoulders as well. All right, last stretch, micro movement that I'll have you do. All right, your torso does not have to be parallel to the floor. You can be bent forward even just a little bit or upright. And it's really just getting that thoracic spine moving a little bit. So kind of leaning on your chair or grabbing a fixed object or even your thigh, leg yourself, and twisting for a nice hold there as well. This is really to open up the back, open up the chest. Again, just try and get out of that sort of gremlin slump that we find ourselves in sometimes when staring and typing at a computer for so long. All right, it's on to someone else.
Thank you, Christine. I now have the pleasure of introducing Susan Ronaldi, who is the Director for the Academic Achievement Hub in the Teaching and Learning Commons.
Hello, everyone. It's very nice to be present with you this evening. And on the first slide, you see here some goals. It's really to help you and your student to build space and time to support goals, many of which for your students is learning to study and study to learn. So we've already had a great part of our presentation with self-care. It's very important just for you all to remind your students about self-care, because truly learning begins and ends with how we are as human beings around health and well-being. And really, it's the one component that really gets in the way of effective studying and also long-term learning. So that was a really important piece and a good way that it was. We're going to segue now into something else that's really important for all of you and for your student and budding scholar, is really how to set up a plan for the learning environment. This is critical for all of you to maintain some health and well-being in the homestead as well. So, or your, whatever environment you find yourselves all managing in. So we're going to talk about managing space and time, identifying space or carving out that space, in what communication is positive and how you can then work around each other and with each other with the space. And when is the space needed, what to do when you're in the space, and then really why it's critical to the well-being of your scholar for their learning efforts. Next slide, Dan, please. Okay, there's a lot on the slide. I'm just going to go through each piece individually. We're going to talk about space first. Creating a space that's uniquely the students is important to really, even you see the Pomodoro method, even if it's that period of time where they're doing sequences of 30 minutes or an hour at a time, it's up to the student to have good communication with them, is really to understand how they study. They will need, and they do need, as you're probably seeing already, since our quarter started, daily space that's either private or somewhat a space with minimal distractions. And then how to function in a busy home where maybe you yourselves are working at home as well, and maybe there's shared space. That's really complicated when there's synchronous meetings. That means meetings in time, in person, just like we're doing right now. So how to manage that with each other. I can't say most, it's in the middle here, is about communication. Really sitting down, if your son, daughter, or they have not yet communicated to you, what does their schedule look like in a daily manner, is really important. And this really should include parents, siblings, or if there are other members in the household or living environment. Discuss expectations and needs then with everyone in attendance. You can have the student really create a shareable calendar and or walk you through their schedule. This will help with this to understand when and what spaces they need, and really the high need for them. So private times. There are times, and this is again having your student communicate this to you, when they really need to not be interrupted, unless of course there's really an emergency in the home. That would probably be an extenuating circumstance, but those would be exam times for which are really seriously attended. The student usually has a focused amount of time. They are timed situations, and it could be also quizzes that are weekly. So those times should be clearly identified so that the student is interrupted. Some tips for this could be to, if there's a room that's available for the student during these times, to close the door, but then to hang something on the outside of the door. Some brightly colored scarf, a sign that says, do not enter, important at this time, anything that works for you all and your family. So, but this is again back to communication. If you create those kinds of cues, then everyone in the household will help protect that time for the student. There are times, we all know, home environments are such where maybe there aren't necessarily private spaces where a door can be shut. That's not a negative, but being aware of when there are times where the most minimal disruptions are important, like those high stakes or very important assessment times, really then could give the family time to be doing something quieter in another area of the home. So that's very important. Preparation. Whether you have a private space or you have a space for which the student is navigating and doing work on a daily basis. Also, you heard minimal distractions, also meaning you can keep an eye on your student to make sure only one browser is open and they're really focused, so they're not distracted. Maybe helping them learn to not even just have the cell phone on the desk, but maybe off in another area at the time where they can stay focused, as Christine and her colleague have mentioned. Those are things you can help with, because it's very, very easy as things buzz or to get distracted, or if you have other browsers open, to quickly navigate and say, I'll just check for a second. Not so good. The space itself, if there's a private space, really encouraging your student to keep it organized. Make sure that all the parts they need, which are books, notes, the computer, are there in the learning environment. If they need to share a learning environment and maybe they have dedicated time during the day where they're going to use that space, manage it with something that's portable. If it's a backpack or maybe a small box or something, so that they can easily have it move it and migrate it to where they need to in the home as well. These are great ways so that the student has to do the least amount of time searching for things when they need to manage their learning. Okay. So, and the other thing is, if there's shared devices in the home, really, that's another part where communication helps to allow your students or students in the home to have access to the devices as needed. So I would encourage, again, bring them together with you, look at a schedule and understand the needs within those components of the schedule. Okay, next slide, please. Here's the other thing. We know home is a wonderful place to be, but our students also can navigate with each other outside of only academic. There's a lot of virtual academic support networks with our university, really encouraging them to reach out. And even if they really think they don't need tutoring or to manage a study group, it's really a great way to be feeling like you're present in time with your peers that are taking the class together. It's a great way to get to know people in this remote environment where they're not necessarily in person yet with each other if they're not living on campus. So, or they could also, maybe they have a friend that they know that also came from their same high school that are at the university. They could just set up a virtual study time together, really to keep time management, stay focused while learning. It's also a great way to begin to expand out their diversity of meeting others in our institution while we're remote. So really, if they go meet tutors, whether in the Commons or other resource centers on our campus like Oasis, it really extends the people that they know and can always go back to with any type of question. There's lots of tools for connecting that keeps them off of Zoom. It could be a shared Google Drive document. So to avoid some of the Zoom fatigue, they could even chat together in some of these other spaces that I've listed here. Okay, next slide, Dan. There are a group that I oversee and train in the Teaching and Learning Commons and uniquely in my Academic Achievement Hub that are learning strategists. They are students. They are at different levels in the university. They've taken many classes now and really highly trained to help students to any of the tips that I've been talking about. They can help your students with, especially time management. Time seems to get away sometimes when we're in this remote environment and isolated from each other. How to manage study skills. They're all great students. They're, here at the University of California, San Diego, but study strategies need to change a little bit for university level work. So having those conversations early with a learning strategist and many of those other bullet points here really will help them become efficient. These are appointments that your student can create that meet their schedule. It's not a predetermined schedule for them, and they're free. They're an hour appointment to begin the discussions together to learn what the students' needs are, and then they can create additional appointments to stay accountable for the different strategies they're going to be supported with. Next, Dan. Next slide, please. Okay. So some of the other resources, and you're all welcome to really peruse these. You can go to keeplearning.ucsd.edu. Myself and my colleagues in the Teaching and Learning Commons have put together this site. There's really great tips, resources there that extend beyond what I've discussed briefly here. It will also give you links to the Learning Strategist program. And otherwise, you can also view there in a link on the keeplearning.ucsd. I have a learning strategist Canvas site that uniquely only the students in the university can access through their single sign-on. It's a great tip. It gives them exam preparation tips. It's actually a course, self-regulated, They can view any one of those, how to manage taking information out of notes or readings. So there's a lot there. And then they can follow up with a learning strategist appointment. So please encourage them to use these sites as well. And I encourage you to take a look at keeplearning.ucsd.edu. Okay, I think that's the last one, if I'm not sure.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you, Renee and Christine, for sharing that great wealth of information. And I just want to bring attention to all of our attendees tonight that we're moving into our question and answer portion. So please utilize the Q&A function that is located at the bottom of your webinar. But before I break into questions and answers from our panelists, I would like to ask our attendees some questions. So you all have the access to utilize the raise your hand feature. And so I would just like to know who all is joining us tonight. So I've got a few series of questions to ask. And if you identify with these questions, just simply click on that raise a hand feature so we can see who all is joining this session. So the first one I would like to ask is, could you raise your hand if your student is learning from home this quarter? Okay, awesome. That ticker really moved quickly at the beginning there. All right, great, thank you. So now if you would like to unclick the raise the hand, I've got another question. So how many of your students are learning from on campus this quarter, sorry. Oh, wow, okay. So feel free to lower your hand now. And finally, I've got a question is how many of your students are learning from off campus? So they may be in their own apartment or not living at home, but living in their own place this quarter. Okay. Feel free to lower your hands now. Thank you. So I would also ask if you raise your hand if you've noticed that your students' classes are spread out. They're kind of sporadic. Okay. Feel free to lower your hand. And then the last question is, how about the polar opposite? So how many have you all noticed that your students' classes are back to back, or it seems that they're, in Zoom for a long time? Okay, great, thank you. Now we are going to move on to our Q&A portion with our panelists. So I do have a couple of questions for our panelists. So this one I'm going to throw out to all of you to answer, but we had a parent note that this presentation seems to be geared towards those students who are living with their families at home. But what useful resources, or how can students living on campus access any of these resources? Or are there specific resources for students who are living on campus in a residence hall? Yeah, Susan, would you like to start?
Sure. Yes, for those students on campus, for our area in the Teaching and Learning Commons, we communicate very often to all students enrolled in the courses on campus. We're also connected very highly with our college residence assistants, so they know that the Learning Strategist program are available, as well as their advising teams. Both their college advisors and their major department advising. So they are getting this information. I myself have done this presentation similarly for students I know that are living on campus as well, and my staff. So that's a great question.
Renee or Christine, you have anything to add for health promotion services?
Yes, so health promotion services. Health promotion services currently, we are offering all of our workshops virtually, but there's such a wide range of topic areas that we cover in the workshop. So really encourage your students to check out what those opportunities are. I host workshops that focus on things like general health and mental health, one of which is a whole workshop on Zoom burnout and Zoom fatigue. And then Christine does a lot of workshops and different programming related to alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs. So there's that as well. And then we have a health educator focused specifically on sexual health, and then also men's health. So we have a wide range of programs that are going on. And also there's other platforms that we actually deliver our health education messaging that would be appropriate for those who are living on campus, but also those who are off campus as well. So we actually have a podcast called Live Well, Be Well. And that is our in-house podcast where we talk about all things health and well-being. And actually Dan was a guest on that in September. So there's actually an episode for you all to check out. You can go on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or Google Podcasts. And there's actually an episode, Dan discusses some of those strategies in which the parents and families can really support their students during this really difficult time. So please be sure to check that out. It's Live Well, Be Well. And then we also have our Live Well, Be Well magazine. That is released every month. And so just encourage your students to check that out, to keep tabs of the Health Promotion Services Instagram and Facebook account, and just keep up to date with what that programming is like. And I actually wanted to pass it on to Zara. She is in our department as well, and she oversees the zone.
Thank you, Renee. Hi, everybody. My name is Zara Rubio. I'm the Zone Program Manager. And what the Zone is, it's a physical space on campus, all for student health and well-being. And we're under Health Promotion Services. And right now, because we are virtual and in a remote learning environment, most of the programs that we typically offer in person are being offered virtually. So we have things like meditation, we have cooking demonstrations. We're hoping to do some late night evenings for when students are getting out of class after a day, and do things like yoga and tea and paint night. And a lot of the programs we do are for students to de-stress. So kind of taking those breaks, as our panelists had mentioned earlier. And these are scheduled programs that they can attend and tune in. I know they are on Zoom, so it's really hard to avoid that. But we're hoping that this is going to be a little bit different for students, and it won't focus too much on thinking, but more so relaxing and having fun and de-stressing in an alternative way.
And just to add to that, if students want to keep up to date with what the Zone or Health Promotion Services is offering, really encourage them again to follow us on social media if they have that social media. We are at UCSD HPS, and the Zone also has their own Instagram page as well. So just looking out for that. And then if they don't have social media, which is the case at times, also just checking out our website, healthpromotionservices.ucsd.edu. And the Zone, if you just Google the Zone, Zone UCSD, you'll also be able to find it. Zara, is it the Zone at ucsd.edu?
Zone.ucsd.edu.
Yeah. So that is a way to really keep up to date. We are very active on all of our social media platforms and keeping our website up to date. So that's the best way to figure out what's going on in the department.
I had one more thing to add. So similar to Susan, when she has the academic coaches, I forgot their names. Is that the
learning strategists?
The learning strategists, yes. So Health Promotion Services also has health coaching that Renee is doing a lot. She's doing a lot of sessions, but so we do have that as well to help with some other strategies not related to the academic side that Susan kind of touches on. So complementary services, similar coaching, different, more geared toward well-being, wellness, things like that.
Yeah, I was going to add, I see some questions in the chat about what our campus direction is headed for the second quarter. I would highly suggest it'll be very similar to fall quarter, from what I understand. If you aren't aware, I do know that our enrollment for second quarter is coming up. Students will see their winter quarter schedule of classes November 11th, and their registration actually, or enrollment for courses, depending on their dates they're given, begin November 16th. So at that time, by that time, there'll be a definitive university statement around that. I do see some other questions about how are students being socialized if they're living in their apartments or their residences on campus. Really, that is a strong component that I know the provosts and the college student affairs deans have worked with, along with the residence assistants on campus. And I know that they have a strong structure for socializing students, again, but being mindful of social distancing and those things. Additionally, really engaging in, if your students or the courses are remote, there was a question about what other learning opportunities there are. I have a large program that's called supplemental instruction, and also a study group program that is formalized. It's really supports a lot of first year and some second year courses for our students. It's a great way for students to work through and learn with each other material, so they can leave that classroom environment and have other opportunities for learning. Our programs themselves are not on Zoom, but it is still another remote platform. So unless courses are in person, and they usually are small discussion sections, generally the courses are definitely on Zoom. Or recorded by the faculty, and then their students are invited to discussion sections, office hours, or the instructor hosts those sessions during the actual time where the course was scheduled. So those are some of the different ways that instructors have been utilizing time.
Great, Susan. Thank you for sharing. We do have another question from a parent that says, what do I do if I see my student is exhausted or fatigued from being online all day?
I can contribute to that one. I can answer that one. So I think one thing is just, again, as Susan mentioned, that communication piece is going to be really important. So getting comfortable talking with your student about what they're experiencing. Are they having any challenges? Do they need additional support, whether that's academically or personally? And then also just encouraging them, if you've noticed that they've been sitting at their desk for hours on end, and you haven't seen them get up to even take a drink of water or just to go on a walk, just really encouraging them to, hey, take a break. It's okay, your work is going to be there. Why don't you take a break to go outside, get some fresh air, maybe have a glass of water, maybe even take a power nap. A 20 to 30 minute power nap can be really beneficial. So just having that open dialogue and just getting really comfortable talking to your student about, practicing that self-care. So it's going back. This is pretty much that time in our lives where self-care is probably more important than ever. And it's just making sure we are taking those breaks, we're eating healthy foods, we are moving our body, like Christine mentioned. So again, I think it just goes back to that communication piece.
Great, thanks, Renee. I even myself forget to make sure I'm drinking enough water. So I can only imagine how students are dealing, trying to jump from class to class. Another question we have is, are there any movements recommended if my student may be physically limited? Are there any different recommendations for micro movements or ways they can physically de-stress during online class?
Yeah, I will take that one. I think it kind of does depend too, obviously, on the restriction. So if legs are not movable, then really being able to twist or utilize some of the arm. If there's limited movement from maybe sort of torso, but they have sort of arm ability, I think why like stress balls are really nice, or any sort of way to kind of get the blood flowing a little bit with arm movements as well, hand movements. We so easily tense up in our neck as well, so really making sure to drop those shoulders, doing some shoulder rolls, some head tilts too, some yeses and nos, things like that will help a decent amount for sure.
Great, thanks, Christine.
Mhm.
Okay, I think what may be our last question of the night is, what do you recommend for students living off campus with roommates who are also students? How can they work to manage workspace in what may be a smaller apartment, or how may they support each other taking online classes or learning online together?
Probably take that. I think, again, communication with students living off campus is really understanding, again, schedules so that they are respectful of each other. You know, there's a natural tendency to kind of maybe go knock on the door if they're using their spaces, that there's a door that can shut to study or to be in their virtual classroom space. Additionally, really, you know, encouraging them to watch this video so that they can take the great tips from our, you know, from Renee and Christine here, and really maybe create a time where they hold each other accountable for taking breaks, making sure water is something, you know, for each other as well, and food in the home so that they're adequately supporting themselves with proper nutrition. But again, for studying, you know, I think most students are really very serious about their success at UC San Diego, and really acknowledging what that means, that it's there's a lot more in the ways to learn efficiently and keep themselves accountable without spending 12 hours a day or 14 hours a day just studying. So there's all of those pieces, encouraging them to seek outside resources, like the learning strategists or the coaches that Christine mentioned, are really important resources, especially if they're newer to UC San Diego, to help them find that focus, hear from experienced others that have already managed their first year.
Great, thank you so much, Susan. Now, you did mention sharing tonight's presentation. So I just want to cover that tonight's presentation will be available on our YouTube channel, which is Parent and Family UC San Diego Parent and Family Programs. We will be sending out a link to the video throughout this week, and the links to all of our sessions that will be recorded and uploaded to our YouTube channel. And I want to cover that YouTube does include a feature where you can utilize the closed caption setting and then select a preferred language to translate. So if your student would rather hear this in a preferred language, Spanish or Mandarin or Portuguese, YouTube does allow for the automatic closed captioning to be translated. So again, all of our sessions will be uploaded onto our YouTube channel tomorrow. I also want to cover our upcoming Homecoming at Home sessions. Today is just the start. We've had a wonderful session brought to you by amazing panelists, but we've got a bunch left in store for you. So from Parent and Family Programs, we are offering a set of events that will cover all throughout the rest of the week, tomorrow, Thursday, and Saturday. So we know you've already registered for this session, and we hope that you can attend all the other sessions that we are putting on throughout the week. It's going to be a lot of fun, really informational, just like this session was tonight. Also, if you would like to attend any of the Homecoming at Home signature events or the other events offered, like the esports tournament, the Triton virtual tailgate, and the live performance from Switchfoot, you can actually access all of that at the Homecoming Hub, which is located at homecoming.ucsd.edu. And for us at Parent and Family Programs, we are not just done with Homecoming at Home and our family weekend track of sessions during this week, but we are actually leaning into the virtual environment, and we'll be providing future webinars. And so you all are actually the first to know what our upcoming programming schedule is looking like for the rest of the academic year. And so we have some webinars coming up that include a holistic view of the UC San Diego experience, a tale of two worlds, and that's navigating the home community and the university community. 10 questions your students should ask their academic advisor, and also supporting your students' journey after UC San Diego. So what's next after they've completed their journey here as a Triton? I just want to thank you all for attending our session. Thank you to our great lineup of panelists and the staff that have supported tonight's session. I've hoped you've all enjoyed it and have gotten something from this session. And we hope that we see you throughout the week at our other Homecoming at Home sessions. If you have any questions or we didn't get to something, you can feel free to reach out to us at parents@ucsd.edu. I really encourage you to visit our website, which is parents.ucsd.edu, or follow us on social media and our accounts listed. Really, especially that YouTube channel that we've just launched, which is /UCSD Families, where you'll be able to view all of our session recordings from Homecoming at Home. With that, thank you all. Have a wonderful evening. Stay safe and stay healthy. And we hope to see you at our next Homecoming at Home session.